What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we're going to jump in with a roundup of what Bungie have previewed for Year 5 of Destiny 2. We've learned quite a bit about the Witch Queen, but there are probably a handful of changes we've either forgotten about or possibly never even heard about, because as always the distribution of information around expansions and things like that can be a little bit scattered. So in this video we're going to focus on some Witch Queen changes, like adjustments to exotic weapons and activities, but we're also going to take a bigger look at some significant changes which will be delivered across Year 5, like the launch of Season 16, weekly raid rotations, new PvP maps, game modes, Gambit updates, significant vendor changes, and more. There's quite a bit to chew on, so I thought you guys might appreciate it all in one place. And if you enjoy the video, feel free to subscribe to the channel for more, or drop a like below. But otherwise, let's get into it. And let's start out with some patch previews and teasers, particularly those pertaining to weapon archetypes and exotics. And for Witch Queen, Bungie said they've spoken previously about wanting legendary weapons to have more identity based on their source, and expect to ship a new system for this in or close to Witch Queen. And this relates to weapon differentiation. They give the example, if I have two Void adaptive hand cannons, one from the Soros Foundry and one from the latest raid, why do I care about one more than the other? The stats tend to be fairly close, perk pools can be different, but there are only so many perks, and it's a stretch to say the perk pool gives the weapon its identity. And so they say we've got something shipping on all new and reissued weapons in the Witch Queen that addresses this issue directly, and are working to expand the same solution to all weapons that drop in the future. And so that sounds like a reasonably significant change to weapon identity, but in terms of precisely how Bungie deliver that, we're going to have to wait for more information. However, they've also said on the subject of exotic weapons that in Season 15 we tweaked exotic primary weapons to generate ammo faster through ammo finder mods, but we have another change planned to make them more enticing in hard PvE content. And just this week, Bungie revealed that they'll be removing orb generation from masterworked weapons, and instead weapons generating orbs will be done by way of new helmet mods, which will add orb generation to weapons of particular elements. So to produce orbs on weapon kills with a Void weapon, for example, we'd have to have the Void orb mod slotted into our helmet. And this has seen some negative feedback because of course, you'll have to use mod slots to generate orbs, and potentially need multiple mods, or to change mods regularly depending on what weapons you're using, which may get annoying, so give us your thoughts about it down below. But they're also adjusting some exotics that consistently top the PvP usage charts in an oppressive way, some that had their perks limited to a degree that's no longer warranted, and they say we're looking at you chaperone. And so while we will need more specifics on these weapon changes, both across legendary and exotics, there are going to be some pretty holistic adjustments to how they behave, hopefully both improving identity, but also the desire to use more of those weapons. So again, we'll have to wait for specific tuning nodes for weapons, but another thing to add is that while we currently have the full auto retrofit mod that allows full auto on hand cannons, sidearms, scout rifles, and pulse rifles, Bungie say they have a settings option in the works for a season after Witch Queen, and so eventually we'll be able to apply that to weapons without using the mod. And the final couple of adjustments which will affect us going into Year 5, but starting in Season 16, the seasonal artifact will be completely unlocked, meaning that we'll technically be able to unlock all 25 artifact mods by the end of a season. However, after unlocking the 12th mod, significantly more XP will be required in order to unlock the next mod. So it'll definitely be a grind, but it opens up that opportunity. And finally, for Masterworked Armor, Bungie say we'll be able to change the energy type of a Masterworked Armor piece for a much reduced cost. And a fully Masterworked legendary piece of armor can be changed to a different energy type for 10,000 Glimmer and an upgrade module, while fully Masterworked exotic armor can also be changed for the cost of 20,000 Glimmer. But nonetheless, we'll be given that full flexibility on armor elements moving forward. And so as always, I'll keep you posted when we get more details about that, but next let's speak about the launch of Season 16. And of course when we get expansions, there is the expansion content specifically, as well as separate season content that launches alongside the expansion. And typically there has been a little bit of a delay before that season content will launch. But Joe Blackburn in an interview said, I think Season 16 is going to be the next big boiling point for us. We've really had trouble with some of these seasons that come out right alongside the expansion, and so we've put a lot of thought and effort into how we want to do that better this time around. We know that it can feel tough for seasons to matter when it drops a week after the launch of an expansion, and of course players have already got access to raid weapons and pinnacle gear. And so he says, we're really excited to get Season 16 out day and date with Witch Queen this time, and to have a lot of stuff for players to do and engage with, and really see the value immediately. Not only to give you stuff to do while you're leveling up, but to give extra opportunities while you're prepping for some of those endgame activities. So of course that confirms Witch Queen and the Season 16 content drop is essentially all gonna happen at the same time. That'll definitely make February 22nd a busy day. And he adds that the team has been really happy with Seasons 13 through 15 in terms of their rewards and story. he says that they've still been doing a little bit of robbing from seasons to pay for things like the raids. And he gives the example of Vault of Glass being part of the kind of designated content for Season 14, meaning one of the exotics for the season ended up in the raid, and it perhaps closed opportunities to do other things like exotic quests. So he says we're really trying to make sure as we go into 4 pieces of raid and dungeon content a year that the seasons are fully funded, and that those dungeons and raids feel like the icing on the cake, and won't detract from the seasonal content drops that we're going to see. Which essentially should result in more content being featured in each of the seasons next year. And now to speak about some of that content, Bungie have clarified that we're going to see 2 brand new dungeons launched into the game during Year 5. And something that Bungie confirmed about that is that if you get the deluxe edition of Witch Queen, you'll receive the expansion, all 4 seasons, and access to the 2 dungeons. But if you get the standard edition, you can still upgrade to the deluxe edition to get the dungeons at a later date. And they plan to offer a separate way for players to access the dungeons in the future, highlighting that they will not be included in the season passes. And so bear in mind you will need the deluxe edition in order to get access to those dungeons automatically, or alternatively, you'll need to buy access to those dungeons. Which is kind of a different angle on what Joe Blackburn just said about having seasons fully funded. Because while the seasons will be fully funded, part of how that will be achieved is by making players pay for the additional bits of content like dungeons, right? And naturally there's a lot of feedback in the community about that, so give us any thoughts you have below. However, we will also get access to 2 new raids in Year 5. The first one will be Witch Queen's raid, and the second will be a reprise from Destiny 1. And when they asked Joe Blackburn for a hint on which raid that would be, he said, I think by saying it will be one of the big raids, that takes 1 out of the equation. And that pretty much confirms that we won't see Crota's End return in Year 5, and so the candidates are Wrath of the Machine and Kingsfall, but naturally with the Hive content focus, it's likely that they decided to go with Kingsfall for Year 5. But Bungie are also planning on adding a featured raid rotation at some point in Year 5 too. And so Joe Blackburn said we're trying to create a situation where our back catalogue of raids and experiences that people love and want to play feel like they get their time in the sun. We also don't want it to feel like every raid and dungeon is always on all the time, as that could make the chore list for the game too significant. And we have previously seen raid rotations like the one we got in Age of Triumph, which also came with additional rewards like the armor glows and stuff like that. But Joe Blackburn says there's a lot here that we're probably excited to talk about in the future as things get hardened up. However, the raid rotation is a thing that Bungie are going to implement, and they're currently considering different ways to reward those. But it should make the weekly rotation and also endgame a bit more interesting. And then we get 2 PvP updates, and Bungie have actually given us some for Year 5. So Joe Blackburn said that the plan for Season 16 is to port 2 vaulted Destiny 2 maps to be compatible with the new engine updates. And so alongside Witch Queen, we should see 2 maps from Destiny 2 that are currently not in the rotation. Then he says after reprised maps in Season 16, Season 17 will come with a brand new map, and he hints at there being a bunch of new environments that they're excited to start bringing into the Crucible, so it's possible we'll see a Europa PvP map. And then he says finally after those 3 maps are added in Season 16 and 17, we'll be remastering a Destiny 1 map and bringing it to D2 for the first time in Season 18. So at least Year 5 will finally see some new PvP maps. And then Joe Blackburn says that the team is investigating getting the Rift game mode into Destiny 2 during Year 5. But he adds that the team has a lot of work to do to validate that the mode is compatible with the current gameplay of Destiny, and finally said that the team is working on multiple brand new modes for 2022. They're not quite ready to spoil them yet, but they're excited to offer new twists and rules to the ways that you can make Shaxx proud. So while it's been a very long time since we got a significant number of PvP updates, it does at least look like in Year 5, we're going to start to see Crucible get a bit more love. And then since that time, DMG has confirmed that Bungie are looking at Gambit updates for Year 5. So it says the team is looking at Gambit during the year of Witch Queen, and they understand the frustration from players on the lack of updates for the mode. And he points out that Trials and Trials Labs has been the key focus for a while, but they are looking to use some of what they've learned there to give swifter updates and more regular content to other modes like Gambit. And then on top of this, there was a suggestion that Iron Banner will see a rework, bringing Lord Saladin in line with other vendor reward track systems like we have for Crucible and Vanguard at the moment. No further info has been given just yet, but it's on the cards, possibly during Year 5. Next though, let's speak about weapon crafting. It appears that there's going to be a zone in Savathun's throne world where we'll be able to actually go and craft weapons. And in an interview, Joe Blackburn was asked the question, is there a way that we'll be able to gradually pick off all of the perks on a weapon until we have them available to craft? And Joe Blackburn said yes, While we still want guns to have unique identities, when you go into the crafting system for the first time and see the recipe of possible perks, players will begin to understand the possibility space, which suggests that all of the potential roles for a weapon will kind of be presented, and that over time there'll be a way to unlock the different possibilities and ultimately craft a god roll of that weapon. And for when Witch Queen launches, we're going to see the Throne World weapons as well as Witch Queen's raid weapons and the Season 16 weapons all inside of that crafting system. However, Bungie did say that they'll be adding other weapons throughout the course of the year, including reprise sets of weapons, and they showed off Warmind themed weapons from Season of the Worthy, which suggests that these could be some of the first reprise drops in that crafting system. At the same time, players have asked about weapon RNG, and whether crafting is going to spoil RNG on weapon rolls. And to an extent, for certain weapons and weapon sets, players will absolutely want to take the prescribed route and work on crafting, but let's also bear in mind how many different places there are that weapons can actually drop in the game. And just because a weapon is in the crafting system doesn't mean that it can't drop randomly, right? So you could have your eye on an SMG from the Throne World, for example, start working towards a god roll, but then actually get a god roll dropped randomly in the first week of the expansion. So it seems like there's a way that both systems can kind of work inside of the game. The targetable system with weapon crafting, but also that random possibility that you could get one of those weapons as a god roll that you really like anyway. And so I'm very much looking forward to getting more info about crafting and seeing which weapon sets are going to be added. A quick mention for the Destiny content vault right here. Bungie updated it for Year 5, and we've covered that a couple of times, where we're going to see the removal of the Tangled Shore, a rework to the helm, and then other activities and rewards going away. So I'll link a video down below as well as the article on that content vault if you want to catch up and see what will change in Year 5. But the final very big change that we're going to see across the course of Year 5 are light subclass reworks, and all subclasses are going to be funneled into the stasis style system with fragment and aspect-like application of perks and abilities. And the first element they're going to be working with is Void, so we'll get Void 3.0 alongside Witch Queen. And part of the change for Void will be new categorization of status effects and things like that, which will not only be on subclasses, but also may be seen on weapon perks, exotic armor, and mods from artifacts. So that'll include suppression, where the target is knocked out of any active abilities and can't activate any abilities or movement modes as long as suppression persists, as well as AI combatants not being able to shoot weapons. Then there is Weaken, where the target takes increased damage and has their movement slowed, as well as a decrease in weapon accuracy. And then Volatile, where the target is afflicted with unstable void energy and will explode upon taking additional damage or upon death. And then there will be 3 positive effects that we can apply to ourselves and allies, so Void Overshield, of course the Overshield we have right now, which reduces damage taken from combatants. Invisibility, where you vanish from sight and don't appear on the enemy radar. And Devour, where you feast on the energy of your foes, with kills restoring full health, granting grenade energy and extending Devour. And so some of these effects that we've previously associated with particular subclasses are going to become more universal. And then there are the fragments and aspects for the Void subclasses. So for Night Stalkers, there's Shadow Shot and Mobius Quiver, and you can fire 2 volleys of 3 Void arrows in a cone which seek out enemies and spawn Void anchors on impact. Shadow Shot will make tethered enemies volatile and deal increased damage to tethered targets. And they say by firing multiple arrows at once, it'll be easier than ever to blanket an area with traps in preparation for a fight or to put burst damage on a boss. Then there will be the Stylish Executioner aspect, and defeating a weakened, suppressed, or volatile target grants invisibility and true sight, and after performing a Stylish Execution, your next melee attack while invisible will weaken enemies. And they say a twist on the Middle Tree Night Stalker's current Flawless Execution perk, this aspect lets the Hunter specialize in defeating debuffed enemies to keep looping their invisibility. And so that sounds pretty exciting, but then we've got Titans, and for the Sentinel Overwatch aspect, you can cast a Void Empowered Barricade to grant a Void Overshield to yourself and nearby allies, and the Empowered Barricade slowly regenerates the Void Overshield of allies bunkering behind it. Overwatch is a powerful tool for setting up prior to an encounter and providing a safe haven to fall back to when things get spicy. Then there's Shield Toss and the Projectile Melee, where you hurl your shield towards an enemy, which can ricochet off enemies and surfaces, granting you a small chunk of Void Overshield for each enemy hit. And then finally we get Voidwalker Warlock, with Pocket Singularity, the Projectile Melee, which allows us to launch a tracking unstable ball of void energy that detonates when it nears an enemy, pushing targets away from the blast and making them volatile. With careful placement, it's possible to bop enemies up in the air and then pop their volatile with a well-placed headshot before they hit the ground. And there will be the Child of the Old Gods aspect, where you cast your rift to summon a sentient black hole which hovers at your side, waiting for a target. It will launch itself at enemies, then begin siphoning their energy and weakening them, refunding their life force back to you as either grenade and melee energy if you're using a healing rift, or health if you're using an empowering rift. And defeating enemies who are being siphoned by the child will refund some rift energy, which makes for a strong debuff tool that gives Voidwalkers an additional way to lock down an area while sustaining themselves. And so those are previews of how some of those subclasses will be funneled into the new system. And Bungie have said they will apply this to all light subclasses through year 5, which means we're going to see a lot of updates to subclasses, but also they said it allows them to introduce new perks to those light subclasses at different intervals in time. But they point out that unlike Stasis, we won't have to go and earn all of these abilities, and at least the initial ones when Season 16 starts will already be unlocked. And so, there we go guys, a bunch of changes that Bungie are going to be working on throughout the course of year 5. Some of it tied to Witch Queen, and other stuff being really focused on quality of life and seasons throughout the course of 2022. If there are any things that I didn't mention here outside of Witch Queen that you think should be in the video, definitely let us know in the comments section. But if you've enjoyed it or found it useful, a like rating down below really does help us out. And also, why not get subscribed to the channel so I can keep you posted with everything related to Witch Queen when it drops. Really appreciate the support from all of you guys as always. Cheers for tuning in, and whatever you get up to, I hope you have an awesome day.